Thank you. Well, thank you for having me. And first of all, I do apologize that I don't speak Dutch. There is no excuse. I live in this country for 3 years now and could have learned it. But I still have that goal in front of me. And one day maybe I come back and we can talk in Dutch. So yes, my name is Kristine. I am Latvian. So English is not my native language. Though I will tell you in the beginning that sometimes I have this tendency to just start talking very fast. If that is the case, please just stop me or raise the hand and hope we understand each other. I am a librarian by education, and this year I celebrate 21 years working in the library field. So, matured already. Yes, I do have experience in all types of libraries, but for the last 13 or so years I work in or for public libraries. When I was in Latvia, I was engaged in measurement and evaluation of impact of public libraries, both social and economic. And since I moved to IFLA, so I just continue doing that, and I'm responsible for the resource which is called Library Map of the World, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well today, which is all about statistics, data, impact, and so on. So, and as far as I understand, until now into this course, you are all already impact specialists and know very well what's the difference between output and outcome. And though I don't understand Dutch, I could follow some of your discussion before the lunch. So I think that if you are discussing benchmarks and dashboards, collecting automatic statistics, so you are at a fairly good level. So, but this today and why I'm here is to talk a little bit. So what do we do with that data when we have it, and how to turn it into a story? And the workshop of this afternoon will consist kind of 2 parts. The first part will be a lot of information. So I'll talk a little bit more about what IFLA does in terms of advocacy and how the Sustainable Development Goals fits in there. And I'll share lots of examples of libraries across the world. Not only public libraries, different types of libraries, and how they use the SDGs framework to tell a story about their library, about their communities. And then in the second part, we'll focus a little bit more on storytelling itself, and I'll share IFLA's experience. And when it comes to storytelling, there is no one single recipe on how to go about it, but I will explain our approach, and you'll see how some of those parts, even if you are not telling a story about the SDGs, can be useful in your own advocacy. Does that sound like a good plan? So I hope this to be interactive, and whenever you have questions, just raise the hand and shout out, and let's discuss when we have them. And let's enjoy this afternoon. So at IFLA, we believe that every librarian is an advocate. And it is true. It's because as librarians, we do talk about our libraries all the time. We do talk to different audiences. That's why I want to start with asking you a single question. So when you talk about your library work or your libraries, to who do you talk to? So who are your main audiences to whom you need to give a message? But like in general. Anyone?
Friends.
Friends, I like that. Friends. Any other stakeholders?
Readers, maybe?
Leaders, library leaders or leaders in general?
Leaders and readers.
Ah, leaders and readers. It's a good one.
Children.
Children, okay. I like that.
Our local government.
Local government, yes. It doesn't mean anything that I change the color, it's just that.
educational field, like teachers?
Teachers, okay. It's complete.
Colleagues?
Colleagues, of course.
Ministry.
Ministry. Which? Or ministry?
Culture. Well,
And other.
yeah, not me. Immigrants.
Immigrants. Okay. It's a fairly diverse list, right? Are you happy with this? Represents well your targets? Yups.
Could go on. It's very
Yeah, it could go on. Okay, let's stop here and we will come back to this list later. Okay. So how many of you know IFLA? Almost everyone. Okay. So still I will tell you a little bit about IFLA itself. So IFLA stands for International Federation of Library Associations and Institutions. Okay, so we say that we are the global voice of librarians, of information professionals, of libraries in the world. So we really are international. Currently we have membership in more than 150 countries across the world. And during my presentation you will also see that whatever we do or prepare or make possible, so we really want to make sure that it serves the different needs across the world. And some of the examples also, when we will talk, you'll see that it really is something specific for other countries and maybe is not something that we can relate here in Europe. So this is, and we try to be international. So the headquarters of IFLA is here in Netherlands. It's in Den Haag, and we are based or located in the KB building and share those offices. But we do also have 3 regional centers and 3 language centers who help us to translate a lot of material or to deliver the message to the local communities, etc. So IFLA has gone through a transformation during the last 3 years, and you may have heard that there has been all the global vision discussion, which resulted in a new IFLA strategy. So, and here at the table, at the end, you can also take a copy to read a little bit more about it. But it is an important time for IFLA, is because as I mentioned, during the last 3 years, IFLA started a global conversation about what is important for libraries, what are the challenges for our work, so what are some of the opportunities. And there were librarians of all ages, experiences, different countries engaged in that process. And that all resulted in that vision, which we all share, that we do want to experience and that we strive for a strong and united library field powering literate, informed and participative societies. So in that vision we already have included that our end goal is to have smarter society in general. So this translates into the mission through which we want to inspire, engage, enable and connect libraries and librarians across the world so that we can empower each other and do things together to just make us all stronger and to in benefit of our society. So the strategy has 4 strategic directions, and each of them has like 4 key initiatives with lots of activities in each of them. Which starts with the strengthening the global voice and ends with the fourth activity, which is very important and has never been a part of IFLA strategy, is to strengthen the organization itself. So IFLA currently is also undergoing the change of the governance, where everyone can tell their voice about how they think the IFLA should work, because the organization is really big. We have more than 60 different professional units which are focusing on different topics. Among them is statistics and evaluation section, which is something that you'd be probably interested if you're interested in data and evaluation. So, and librarians as volunteers come together from all parts of the world to discuss and come up with standards, guidelines, and to just improve our work. So where does the advocacy stand in this? So the first strategic direction is kind of all about the advocacy. And here, one big part of it is related to SDGs. Okay, so the big chunk of our advocacy work at IFLA will go into the direction of SDGs and highlighting the library's role through this framework. And as we will learn, that this framework really is super useful to talk about many different aspects of our work. We also are trying to build and strengthen our relationships and our voice in international organizations. Like when it comes to SDGs, it's United Nations, or there are other topics where we work in UNESCO when it comes to cultural heritage, or World International Property Organization when we deal with intellectual property and copyright exceptions for libraries, etc. But there are other ways. So if this first is what IFLA does itself, so we also, in terms of advocacy, try to provide tools and resources that other librarians, and as I said, every librarian is an advocate. We provide tools and resources, and I'll talk about them today, which can be helpful in your work, and you can take pieces and bits and pieces from those to just not to reinvent the wheel, but to reuse that material that is available elsewhere. So, and we do also our own campaigns and provide kits for librarians how to engage and just talk about issues with the common voice across the world. And the last but not least, IFLA is currently also building its new IFLA Academy to restructure our training program. And a big part of the training that IFLA is focusing right now will be also related to how do we actually demonstrate the value of libraries across different parts of stakeholders, and what does it mean when it comes to advocacy. Okay, that was a short introduction, very short indeed, about IFLA. It may seem that it's a huge office. It's not. In IFLA we are less than 20 people, and we do work together with librarians across the world. So, but when we talk about advocacy, so why do we need to advocate? And I think that some of the arguments that we have at IFLA are the same ones as you have in your towns and cities, talking about with your municipality leaders or with your ministers at the national level, is that we actually, the first is that we depend on others, right? So we depend on our municipalities, on our funders, we depend on ministries and their decisions in relation to libraries, and we depend also on our users, because at the end, if there will be no demand, there will be no libraries at all. So we need to stay relevant, but at the same time we need to talk to those people and see. So the other thing is that in general, and I think you will agree, that people and our stakeholders has a very good opinion about libraries, right? But it doesn't necessarily translate into action. So how do we go about it? So how do we advocate to make people act on their feelings? So one of the good examples is that if you would see something bad written about libraries on social networks, there will be a bunch of comments and everyone would defend. But when there is a time to go to the municipality and defend, so what are those arguments that we actually use? And there is a competition, you would agree, right? The budget is limited, there is education, there is health, and we don't say that that these areas that the money should not go to school or to the hospital. But what we try to do at IFLA is to argue that libraries is a part of the whole infrastructure. And if we will not remind that, so it will be again forgotten. And as IFLA, as I said, we are doing a lot of global advocacy in global international organizations like United Nations, like WIPO or like UNESCO. But in fact, the most important decisions are taken at the national level or even at the local level. So, and only if we all work together, so and act in all levels, we can achieve things. So that is driving the things behind the advocacy program of IFLA. So what to advocate about? So as I said, there are SDGs, but there are also other things. And these are maybe 8 main arguments that IFLA is using in its advocacy. And first of all, that access to information drives progress across all the SDGs. And if you take a look in SDGs framework more closely, you will see that about 20 indicators explicitly mention access to information. Is it the access to health information, access to innovation information, access to job market information, and access to many other types of information? But if we will not repeat that, it will be forgotten. It's because the libraries are one of the main places where people can access information, right? But when it comes to, and you also know that we'll talk about it a little bit later, but just to mention that SDGs has targets and targets has indicators, right? And there is no specific indicator that measure access to information. Even the target 16, which is about where libraries can find its place, the indicators are different. And of course that indicators framework is being reviewed on an ongoing basis, and this is our chance to get libraries in, just repeatedly arguing for that. So in the same context of SDGs, we argue that libraries are essential partners for development. There are countries where this role is bigger than in others, but there is an opportunity in this if we have right arguments, impact data, and stories to back up our things. Other areas where IFLA is doing a lot of advocacy, and this is not maybe that directly related to SDGs, but I think it's important for you to know that IFLA is advocating for a better copyright framework, which first of all serves better in era when we have digital technologies, because many countries has outdated copyright laws and don't talk about digital media at all. So we know that we started to work cross borders, and when it comes to copyright, not everything is easy. So IFLA goes constantly and participates in all WIPO meetings where those things are being discussed, and provides a lot of briefing and tools so that countries can just take and we all talk the same voice. So the next is openness, and everything that is related to open data, also in research, or open access. So that's another argument that IFLA is making, that openness is a driver for progress and for transparency, also when it comes to government information and how open it is, and how governments also let other people to implement those principles of openness. The next, but not least, is a cultural heritage and other types of heritage. We argue that preserving it and making it available to public makes our society better. So, and here we work together with UNESCO. IFLA has a separate network of preservation and access centers when it comes to cultural heritage, and a separate program is in this area. Then, which is also related to libraries, is public internet access. So there are big number of countries where the public internet access is for free and it drives progress, but it's not the case in all countries. So we are arguing that public internet access in libraries should be seen by governments as a part of the overall broadband infrastructure in the country and so on. Intellectual freedom may be obvious, but it's not always the case. So freedom of speech, things like these, as a basic human right, and IFLA will always be talking about intellectual freedom as a separate topic as well. And the last but not least is that in the time and in response to fake news, we are also advocating for the library's role in providing media and information literacy, which is sometimes unseen by governments in many countries. So we say that the education, also informal, provided by especially public libraries, has a major role in the development. So these were the main kind of areas of where the big chunks of advocacy work is done by IFLA. And the next question I put is, so when do we do the advocacy, right? So of course we do a lot of things daily, but just by talking to friends or by talking to our readers. But there are specific times in a year when we can get more organized. And when it comes to SDGs, first and the biggest thing is something called Global Week to Act for SDGs. It is in September, and it actually coincides with other important dates, which are Access to Information Day, and there is also a specific World Development Information Day. So, and when it comes to SDG advocacy, all IFLA's work is actually like running to July. And then we also do things in September. And something that is important in July is that, I don't know how much you know about the overall processes behind the United Nations and the SDGs work, but governments need to report on the progress on an ongoing basis. It's not that there is this Agenda 2030 and then we come together in 2030 and see if we manage to do something, but there is the overall process behind it. So, and it's called High-Level Political Forum. It usually takes place in July, and it happens in New York, when like UN permanent mission representatives and governments meet, and then they report. And each year there is approximately 45 to 50 countries who volunteer to do their interim report and report it to the United Nations. And this process is all called voluntary national reviews, which we also now at IFLA try to engage in a more organized way, because we also see that this is an opportunity for countries through their associations, through their national libraries, to get in touch with the government officials who are preparing those reports. And because there is no structure and governments can report on whatever, of course there are indicators, but they can add additional information. It's a good chance to show what actually libraries are doing for those SDGs. So this is when it comes to SDGs. IFLA is also producing a lot of tools and resources. I'll show some of them, which helps to engage in all those processes. Okay, but there are other things, and here I have 12 slides. I was contemplating still yesterday if I delete them or I include them, but I thought I leave them here because after the presentation you'll get the slides and you can come back and just read a little bit more. But what I want to say is that IFLA also focuses its advocacy around those international days, and each month has a different focus. Like January, for example, was a copyright week, and it was a data privacy and protection day, day of education. And IFLA usually produces sort of the visual materials, blog articles and press releases, and highlight the library's role in those days. So the February was all about the Safer Internet Day, and I don't know how many of you have engaged in those, but like in my country, in Latvia, there is at least 70% of libraries who do specific events for safer internet, have training for teenagers and children to learn them how to deal. March, there is a day which is called International Women's Day, which is celebrated across the world. And because also the SDGs, there is a big part about gender equality. So this year IFLA chose to focus out of all of those to focus a little bit more on this International Women's Day. And there is available on our website something that is called an advocacy kit for libraries, where we tell what will be IFLA's own actions and give some examples of what you can do in your library or what you can do together with your users to just make this topic more visible. And because there are so many days, each month kind of have different focus. Like for example, in April there will be a focus on health, and this is where we again can highlight libraries' contribution to SDG number 3, which is about health. April, as you all know, is a big month for libraries across the world because of the World Book and Copyright Day, and many countries has also the Day of Librarians celebrated during this month. Is there a day for librarians in Netherlands? No? Library Week? Nope. So just so you know, there are countries, also in Latvia there are countries which celebrate librarians and libraries during April because of this International Day and World Intellectual Property Day. There are even countries, which I learned working in a library map of the world, where the celebration of the Day of Librarians is approved by law. Yeah, some ideas. Okay, so the big list for May, you can just read it through and see if it's something is interesting. There in June is about environment. There are many SDGs about the climate change and indicators under some which are not even called climate. August, the World Indigenous People Day, Youth Day, International Literacy Day. October is another month full of different areas of focus. And IFLA will be focusing on those and will be releasing materials which you can just take and reuse, nice graphics. You don't have to just translate them, you don't have to spend that much time. And in October there is one week which is called European Code Week, which is again one specific day or week used by public libraries across Europe to organize different type of events. Do you have a question?
I think it's in the week of the mediawijsheid.
Yes, it maybe is.
You also have like the Code Week.
Yes.
So I think it's
that's it. Yes.
Who is making up all those days? Because it's
there are different organizations behind them. Some of them are UN, some of them are just different other international organizations, like also the WIPO and things. So these are recognized and celebrated for years.
But the most of them aren't celebrated in the Netherlands, I think.
Yes, but it's up to everyone to choose because there are so many. Imagine if you wanted to take all of them.
We also have a Dutch list, which about every day of the month.
But I don't know if you ever took a look, maybe those Dutch days also coincide with those international days. You just know those days because they are celebrated in Netherlands. And not everything from that list will be applicable for your situation also. So November and December. December is important because there is a Human Rights Day. And it's kind of the big summary of the year also for IFLA, but the big focus will be on that day. Something interesting here is Volunteers Day, if your libraries have volunteers, so it's a good time to just thank them and do some community engagement around those days. And it will all be come together in a nice advocacy plan. Okay, so now a little bit different thing. So how to actually advocate. And now, let's go back to the list. So you had your audiences here. Let's think about, so what do you do? So what type of data, evidence, arguments, I don't know, mediums you use to talk about your library? Stories, data, statistics, reports, anything that comes to mind?
I don't understand the question.
Okay, last time when you went to the municipality, so what do you use to talk about your library? Is it a report? Is it an infographic? Is it a statistic about the number of users in your library?
Depends on the audience.
Yes, let's just make a list first of all ideas.
Yeah.
What can be helpful?
It's
So-
our annual report.
Annual report.
Impact on social matters like
Social impact.
yeah.
Daily stories.
Daily stories.
Books.
Sorry?
Books.
Books.
Infographics.
Infographics. Do you do a lot of infographics?
What's a lot? I don't think we use
No, is it a good practice in Netherlands in general to use a lot of infographics? More and more.
Yeah.
So you start to use them.
Yeah.
Mhm. Anything else?
newsletter.
Newsletter. Yeah.
Presentations. Website.
Presentations. Websites. Films.
Shared work sessions.
Sorry?
Shared work sessions.
Ah, shared work sessions, yes. I will just put it somewhere in the middle.
Vlogs.
Blogs. Blogs.
Vlogs and vlogs.
Vlogs. I'm not sure I understand what it is.
Videos. Blogging.
Ah, vlogs. Vlogs, vlogs.
Emotions.
Emotions. I like this. Is- what was it?
No, it was a joke. It was emoticons. We use emoticons too.
Emotions is strong.
Uh-huh. Okay. I think it's a lot, no? So we'll make links to this a little bit later. Yes. So we do use
Body language.
not all of this, but different types of things, like different data even, evidence, emotions, for different things. So sometimes all we need is just to inform. So that's easy. You can use an annual report for this, and here is the information. You can read the report, or you can tell. Sometimes you need to describe. And to describe is a little bit more than just to inform, is because you have to give some information. So maybe you need to describe what was the situation. You go and ask for money, for example, for a new project. So you need to describe and have a little bit more of this. Sometimes you need to educate. And when it comes to advocacy within the library field, we actually, sadly, need to educate a lot. So during that same Code Week, there is an event organized by an organization called Public Libraries 2030 in the European Parliament. where we have an interactive exhibition about libraries and the technology used in the libraries, and where we meet with members of parliament to talk about the role of libraries. And when I meet someone and they ask, so what are the newest books in your library from the last months, then I understand that I need to educate. So then I have all my other statistics, which is related to trainings that we do, community outreach events, computer use in the library, other digital collections and things like that. So when I say educate, so we really need to educate in a smart way our stakeholders, so that we respect them, but use our data wisely to demonstrate that libraries are much more than books nowadays. And then we need to persuade. And when we need to persuade, this is, well, from my experience usually, then we need to have some human voice behind that, because data will work for some. For some, we need stories. And we need to be prepared for all those cases and need to know our audience very well to really see how much emotions we can use with some or another. So, and when it comes to advocacy, there is unfortunately a communications gap through which we go, all of us. So first, if we are not prepared, we would not be able to communicate very well to our target audience. That's why it's important to prepare, and we will talk about some of the questions to ask to ourselves before we go and talk out loud. But then there is another thing which comes to the work together among those who evaluate and those who are actually working in communications department and will go out with our message. Something that I experienced from my own experience a lot is that some people just have what I call data phobia. I used to have a boss like that. In Latvia we had public libraries development project. We did many studies. We had like bunch of data, and I give it to my director when he goes out to give an interview. I listen to interview, he's not using anything. It's just no point. I give another time when he goes to the ministry, prepare a report with all the impact we had. He uses no data. And then I just learned that, well, for people like that who really are scared of data and has no skill to interpret that data, okay? So that you need to really give him just one number and tell what it actually means, okay? Another thing is that those of us who are good at measuring things, doing questionnaires, collecting a lot of performance data, doing impact evaluation, we sometimes have other things. We are afraid to go out and actually start and talk about it. And it's not only about that we are afraid, but also that sometimes, let's call it professional stupidity, especially those who only work in evaluation, like I did for that program for 7 years, was just responsible for the evaluation, and that's it. So I can't see how I can, in a good way, tell those statistics, because for me, everything is important. But when a communications department talk to me, so they say this, this, and this. So this doesn't need to be difficult. And that's why I think the way forward is just to see what other people are doing and to take good practices and to take things that work for us. And not everything works in all the context, and we need to be cautious about what is it that we take and replicate in our situation. So, and from here I will tell you about those tools and resources that IFLA has, and maybe there will be something that is useful for you when it comes to talking about your libraries, or sometimes you can just take a contextual information to compare, and you talked a little bit. This one word I understood was benchmarking. So you are looking forward to comparing among yourselves, but there will be things where you can compare with other countries sometimes, and what is possible. So the library map of the world is something that IFLA is building as a main source of first data, second stories, and we will talk more about the stories part of it, and the new thing that we now call the country profiles as a source for the advocacy. Okay? How many of you have heard about it? Some? Okay, good. I'll tell a little bit more for others. So, Library Map of the World is IFLA's project, which started in 2017. And the main reason for that was that IFLA is saying that it's global voice, but actually we don't know how many libraries we represent. Okay? So there is no such a statistic saying how many libraries there are in the world. So that was the main driving force for this project to start, and it started with the goal of collecting basic statistics from all countries around the world, and I'm talking at the country level statistics, like the national level. You would be able to go online and you should be able to find statistic of how many there are public libraries or school libraries in Netherlands in this website. So since 2017 we managed to engage more than this number, but on the site you will find 127 countries with some data. And here you must be aware that not in all countries data collection is so developed like than here in Netherlands. There are countries where they even cannot tell how many libraries they have, because there is no system in place. They have no idea that international standards exist, that they don't have to create anything. But this is work in progress, and those countries more advanced can give an example to those others. So what you can do here is now you can download the full data set in CSV from the website, and then try to do your own data visualizations, compare it to some other statistics like population numbers, for example, taking like open source data sets from World Bank, for example, if you are interested in comparing how you are against other countries. So this is the source of data that you have. So back in 2017, because of this IFLA's big focus on SDGs, we understood that we have to have some place where we can highlight the contribution libraries are making on SDGs. And it was decided that the library map of the world will be this source. And then all the challenges started. We understood that librarians are not prepared to tell a story in a way where the main target group is the policy maker and the focus on SDGs. And there were two problems. One was that not everybody knew what are the SDGs and how to read this framework. It means that it's hard to relate if I don't know about what it is. And another is that there is a lack of focus on impact, which is changing also through workshops like this. That's why I'm very happy to see that more and more impact people are generated through this. And hopefully we'll get more and more stories online. So we'll talk more about this. The second part of the workshop will be about the approach we are taking. And the third thing is the country profiles, which is like a comprehensive information about all the library systems and organizations and everything. So we use ourselves, and I'll show you an example of how to use this data in messaging, in presentations whenever you need. You use stories to motivate, to persuade, inspire others to act, sometimes to show to our stakeholders what is possible elsewhere, especially with services when other people do something and we want to introduce it. And here a good example is when we started the public library development project in Latvia. So the Gates Foundation gave us a lot of money, but we needed to give co-funding. So we needed to persuade every municipality leader. At that time we had 120 to give this 50% co-funding to their libraries. And we had no idea how to show them that these things are possible, where librarians train people to use ICTs and what can be an outcome. So we use stories from Chile in this, because we didn't have our own. And yes, the country profiles is something where we work together with associations or the national libraries, and this is the place to highlight the priorities, because the main target group for this are policymakers, for them to understand and quickly learn about what is important in libraries. So the other source of information when it comes to advocacy that you can use is something called Development and Access to Information Report. And this is something where IFLA works together with the research organization called TASHA, Technology and Social Change Group, which is a research organization in United States in the University of Washington. And here the report provides a lot of insights and data which are related to the SDG indicators, but highlights the role of libraries in those 4 areas, which is connectivity, equality, skills, and rights. And in this presentation, just glimpses of what you can get from this report. I prepared also the additional information sheets, so there will be links you will be able to just go in and select yourself. But like, for example, if you, and this is an example from Latin America, maybe it's not relevant, but at the end, what we can see from here, it's quite sad that half of the world's population doesn't have access to internet. So this is a report mainly targeted to the governments to take the action at the national level. But there is a lot of information that you can find if you want to put things in the context. Okay. Other thing that is important in advocacy is that, and it's again, I want to say sad, but it is a reality, that sometimes stakeholders would listen to us if it's not us who are talking. They would listen more if these are people not related to the library field. And this DA to I report is using that opportunity. There are chapters of people who are not related to library field, but are talking about how libraries can deliver progress in and reduce inequalities or employment area, or related to education, or even the climate change. And this is the source where you can just go online and find some nice quotes of to support your arguments if that is needed for something like to prepare a report. And then the last thing is the DA to I. It is a printed report in a limited edition as well, but also available online. It uses the library map of the world, the stories, to back up this loads of data and loads of charts with just a human voice. And this is just an example of one of my colleagues using those stories and DA to I and talking about library programs. This library program from Australia, where teenagers were engaged to teach elders to use technology. Okay, so these were DA to I report and the library map of the world are like major IFLA projects, which are ongoing basis, will just be updated and produced. But there are smaller projects which IFLA does, which provides more like hands-on tools, let's say. And when it comes to advocacy, it doesn't need to be difficult. There are a lot of things that you can do in 10 minutes. You can write a social media post, or you can write an article in your website, or you can find who is in charge of some things in the municipality to just set up a meeting or something. And IFLA produced, and it comes out from the last year, when every week we released one tip, let's say. And it's not long, it's like one-page article with just some tips and advices. And it's called the 10-minute library advocate. So I also added the link, so you'll be able to go online and see yourself. And there are 50 series out of it with tips like take a great photo of your library work. It may sound easy and simple, right? It's not the case, it's not happening. We have events, we forget to take photos, and when you want to write a story for the library map, so I will say, I need high quality pictures, and there is no pictures. So tips like this, really very small, practical, very useful. Another resource or the tool for those who are interested in how to engage in those, I mentioned the voluntary national reviews where governments are preparing the reports. So IFLA is currently producing, we started in December, and every month we are releasing, like also again a practical step-by-step guide of things to do on how to engage. Starts with finding out who is in charge. Do you know who is in charge from Netherlands on giving this report? Probably some ministry. So kind of this. Then prepare the stories, prepare your data, how to present your material, and to whom and to when. And again, you can go online and find out yourself if there is something that is useful for your work or is not. And the last thing that I want to mention, talking about tools and showing how we can actually use the data we have in the library map and in DA2I, is that we started this year to come up with a weekly library stat of the week. And if it's also is published on IFLA's blog, where we kind of have this on social media, but with the link to a blog article, like explaining this data a little bit more and adding a data set which we use to come up with arguments like this. Like, for example, having more public libraries tends to be associated with higher literacy rates. Is when we analyze the library map of the world data on the number of libraries in correlation with the World Bank data on the literacy rates, and then you can see the things. And these are, again, maybe useful for some of your advocacy, some of your arguments, to just back up of what you experience in your own libraries and what you found in your own impact studies. Okay? Let's connect the dots. Now on this flip chart, we have two lists. The audiences, and then let's call them tools of what you are doing. So when you talk to your friends, would you use annual report? Social impact?
Yeah.
Yes. Daily stories, right? Books. Blogs. Infographics. Newsletter. Shared work sessions. Presentations. Emotions. Websites. No. Sometimes. And films. Maybe it's a great film. It can be very funny. So you see, and let's take another one. Let's see, you want to talk to local government. You would use annual reports?
Yes.
Social impact? Daily stories? Books? Blogs? No? Maybe you can just write a blog post and then tag on Twitter your mayor. Did you see this? Infographics?
Yeah.
Newsletter?
Yes, we do.
Shared work sessions? It works very well. Presentations? Emotions? Website? And films? Sometimes. So you see how you need to choose what to use in what case. So from now on, like next half an hour, and then we'll take break, Break now? Do you want to have break now? No? Okay. So I'll try to keep it short because this is really going through examples of the global goals. Let's call them this way. So in general, before I start, I want to ask you how familiar you think you are from 1 to 10 with this framework. Like 7? 5?
Yes. 3 or 4.
3 or 4? Okay. I hope after this, so we will do after assessment, okay? So the global goals, this is what everybody knows. Like the image is used like widely across. So, but not everybody know that there are 17 goals, but under those 17 goals are 169 targets and 232 indicators. And as I said, that it's not perfect. It's being reviewed all the time and new indicators are added, and we also want to see library indicators added. So this is expanding and improving over time. But this will be our reality until 2030. And it will not disappear anywhere, and is actually a good framework. So just to give you a glimpse of the complexity, and you'll have a source where to go and explore more, is like, this is one of the most popular SDGs for libraries is of course quality education. Because when you see those 17, you see of course education. We do a lot of training in our libraries, right? And but when you look into those targets, you see that there is a lot of things, and there are only a couple of things where we can relate. Right? And when we work on the SDG stories with countries, we look into this level. So it's not enough for us to say this is quality education, libraries contribute, but to really show how, we need to know what are those targets. And these start like with the primary, secondary education, which is for free, equal access to pre-primary education, equal access to vocational and higher education, and different many aspects, including universal literacy and numeracy when it comes to targets, so that this one is the most popular among libraries because we do a lot of programs that improve reading and writing. You would agree to that, right? But this is just the middle layer, okay? When it comes to real data collection, this is how it looks. And this is just for this one SDG, number 4. And this is the UNESCO's material, which they came up with to explain to us. And there is no need to read it now. It's okay to explain to us how this is being measured at the UN level. And if you read this, you would also find some ideas of how to measure impact in your libraries. For example, under target number 4.3, the indicator for measurement is participation rate of youth and adults in formal and non-formal education. It means that we need to collect, if we want to show our contribution in like aspects of data, we need to collect how many people we train through different programs. Okay, so later at home you can read all of this and then find more. But from now on, IFLA produced, and if you can just distribute this, IFLA produced this material, which is also available on our site, where we kind of highlighted for each. It's not comprehensive, but for the most of the relevant targets, those keywords that are applicable for libraries, which talk to access to information, which talk to development of skills, and things like that. So, and as we will go through those different examples from other libraries, you can just take a look and follow on this sheet. And why it is also important, because when we work on the narrative of the story, we carefully choose the words we use. is because we want to use those keywords that are in those descriptions of those targets. If this talks about the youth literacy, we want to make sure that the youth literacy is mentioned there, because only through those keywords we are able to attract the policy makers' attention, because they are using the same terminology in their daily work. Okay, so now I'll just go each one by one and just give you some examples of what other libraries across the world are doing for SDGs. So SDG number 1, which is no poverty, may seem that this isn't applicable, and of course it's not applicable everywhere. But there are places in the world where libraries are applicable in this. And the target which is relevant under this is equal rights to ownership, basic services, technology and economic resources. So, and we play with the words technology and the basic services. And the picture and the story comes from Kibera, which is in Kenya. And Kibera is the largest slum in Africa. And there are many people living who doesn't have access to those basic services. So, and this gate, the gate leads to the library. There was a community library established, and the librarian introduced the program for children to learn the technology. And the problem actually she solved was that no children before that program actually went to the high school or to the good schools. They were all left in the primary education here in the slum with no opportunities. But they went through this program, which library worked together with teachers, and suddenly children started to be accepted in those schools. And this is only through the story that you can show this kind of contribution, which may be sometimes lost in the data because it will not be representative, okay? And also when we talk about those stories, that every story is an interpretation, right? And this story is also attached to the SDG number 4 because the actual training program that was incorporated in a school curriculum, and it also talks about the partnerships. But here I put just as an example. So this is how libraries do deliver on SDG number 1, which is no poverty. Okay, the next story and the next SDG is called Zero Hunger. I don't know what your first reaction to this is, but when you look into the SDGs, it gets a little bit more clear. So the target 2.3 says that the goal is to double the productivity and incomes for small-scale food producers. And this is the story on the library map of the world with the smallest target group, the smallest project, but which actually at the end of project reported exactly that the farmers to whom the library delivered training on business management, marketing and ICT skills, they reported that they doubled their crops. This is exactly what the target is about. But if you are just looking at the high level zero hunger, you would never think that the program that you have for farmers can deliver on this. Bless you.
Can I
Yes.
add something to this?
Yes.
Because zero hunger is for us, of course, very well, we're not really familiar with this goal, since there's not much hunger in the Netherlands or in the European Union. But there are, I understood, specific indicators for Europe, because we are not working on zero hunger, but for example we're working to B2Bs.
Yes.
It's a different kind of problem, so it might be interesting to see also that there's some differences in indicators throughout the world, since we are fighting different problems.
Yes.
In Africa, for example.
Exactly. So there is some hope and some development in this is because in the European Parliament, I think a couple of weeks ago, they established something called the Sustainability Leaders Group, the group of MEPs who will start to advocate for importance of the SDGs also for Europe. They may come up with, and it's totally clear.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the SDGs like this one, for example, they also have like working with medium-sized farmers, agriculture, and things like that. So it's not only about hunger. And that's
No,
what.
it's
Yeah.
also for Europe, for example, it's more the focus is more on sustainability and climate
Mhm.
in the context of agriculture, whereas in Africa it might be more on productivity and producing
Yes.
food for everyone.
Yeah, but it's a good point, and that's why I think it's also important that in those voluntary national reviews, so the countries also show us what's important for them.
Yeah.
So this is like, of course, it's global goals, but there always will be, and it's us who can then persuade the statistical offices to collect of what's important.
Relevant.
Yes. So number 3 is about health and well-being, and here the example on screen is specifically about sexual and reproductive health and education, which is the program from Ghana, where library engaged into educating young girls about those things, because there was no other. They were not taught in school, and there was no other organization who would do that, so the library took this role. But also here are some other programs maybe included, especially libraries who work with people who have mental health problems and things like that. It's also under those targets would fall. Netherlands. So one thing that we also want to do with the library map is to show that these programs are not unique, but there are similar programs in many countries. And this is a good example. I know every one of you know Bookstart program in Netherlands with very good results for many years, and it falls under universal literacy and numeracy. But there are similar programs, if not the same, all across the world. We also have a story from Australia. And we have a story from Czechia, and we have many other countries who still didn't write their stories for the library map, but that's the main idea when it comes to global advocacy. We want to show the scale, that this is not like something outstanding, but this is the normal thing and the normal practice in the libraries across the world. Gender equality. So here is the program in Tunisia. In Tunisia, women's rights are not in the best condition at the moment, but when you look into the targets and what we want to achieve, the specific target says, is 5B, it says promote empowerment of women through technology. And here is the library who taught the ICT skills specifically to women who were able then to help their husbands also do their businesses or do social networks for them, and started to be more active digitally. Okay, 7. SDG number 7 is about affordable and clean energy, and I imagine Netherlands has completely different view on this, and there is a lot about the clean energy and the sustainable energy, let's say, but in some places across the world it is about basics. And here is the library in Nigeria who opened a 24/7 reading room, and the main benefit for students here is electricity, because they found out that students who are on the campus, so they live in conditions where they don't have electricity, and Nigeria in general has problems with electricity. There are cut downs and things like that. So basically what the contribution in this case is that people can come at any time and study with the light instead of candle. Okay, SDG number 8 is about decent work and economic growth. There are different aspects to it. A lot of it about finding jobs and better jobs, but this particular program is about effective use of resources, and the target here is to improve resource efficiency in consumption and production. So the program comes from South Africa, and what library did is actually the library is located in a very poor area with bad infrastructure. And then many people live poor and don't have access to good food and things like that. And library decided to create what they call community-led garden in their backyard. So they turned actually the small land that they had by the library into the community garden, where they were growing vegetables, and people were coming, and they learned also a lot about how to grow your own food and what you can make out of it. But what happened after this is that not only people took it home, but they actually created like those community kitchens where they were making food in a more efficient way for everyone. So a very good program, a small program, but effective for their communities. Okay, the target number 9 is industry, innovation and infrastructure. And the target here is enhance research and upgrade industrial technology. In this case, there is a gender equality angle to this, but it is about empowering women in science. And here is the university library in Kazakhstan, who took over, and they are using the International Women's Day to do national-wide awareness raising events around how women are in science and things like that. And what they see after 3 years of doing that it actually has a big influence also within the campus, and it drives research. The students work, groups of different students start to talk together to find better solutions for gender equality within their university. The same number 9 can have a different angle, is about the universal access to information and communication technologies. And this is actually a case in many African countries and in Asian countries. And this comes from India, where there are many schools but with very poor infrastructure, and children don't have access to technologies in their schools. Actually, to be honest, there are many schools which are just under the tree in India. And from data that we know, they have 1.5 million school libraries in India, and only 20% of them have real librarians. Many problems. So there is a program which is actually also a university library, which equipped this minivan, which on an ongoing basis goes to those schools with poorer infrastructure and teaches children how to use computer, what is an e-reader, and how you can read online and use different resources. Okay, SDG number 10 is reduced inequalities, but again, if you look in the targets, then there are different focus areas. And one of the focus areas is promote universal social, economic and political inclusion, so include everyone. So a lot of library programs which are about the social inclusion would fall under this target. And the program is from Chile. When they worked with homeless people, it was a rather small group, but with an extensive program, the main goal of which was to empower those people and integrate them back into society, working together with doctors who worked with them, with social workers and with others, to just educate them on their rights. And there were 70% success rate of this program of people who improved their lives. Germany. The same target, but the focus area in this case is on migration policies. And this library is in Hamburg, where they have a program of integrating migrants, and Germany has a big rates of migration as well. To teach them, first of all, German, but also to understand what is the social security system in Germany, or how to find a job, or in which school to put your kids and things like that. So specifically targeting this population.
We also have the same.
You have the same?
Yeah, I think it's the same, but we call it Taal Café.
Taalcafé.
It's a language bar, a language cafe.
Yes, we need to write a story about this. Maybe I can go to that Taalcafé to learn some Dutch as well.
We have made a story of it on our website with a woman who comes to our language cafe, and we made a film.
Yes, you just after the training we can talk and see how we can turn it. Okay, when it comes to libraries, this is super relevant, which stands actually under the SDG 11, which is called Sustainable Cities and Communities. And if you didn't take a look in targets, you would never think that one of the targets is to protect the world's cultural and natural resources. And when it comes to projects of, for example, digitizing and making available cultural collections, so this falls under this SDG. And on the library map we currently have just one, which comes from Iraq, which is about digitizing their manuscripts and making them available to researchers. And we have one man who testified that he actually were able to write and defend his PhD thesis because they opened up those manuscripts which were then hidden in the library. Number 12, and this is about responsible consumption and production. A lot of it around this is about the waste management, the recycling things and stuff. And here is the library from Croatia, which has a program for a long time already, and they do provide a lot of what they call green activities to just change people's understanding about the waste separation, which is really not the case, and they start with their own campus and then go wider. This is a good example for us within the library map, is also because when library applied for having the SDG story, they didn't have any impact. They just had a story that this is the problem in our university, and we had this wonderful program having these workshops and working with those people, but they were unable to demonstrate what was the change for people. So they actually went back and did a questionnaire among their target group, and it took a little longer for them to write that story, but at the end, when they did the impact study in their library, they understood that it's actually not only for the purpose of this story, but actually informs them for their future activities and the program development. And then climate action. We currently have one story from Ukraine, which is called Garbage Hero. And 2 minutes. In fact, they started very dramatic. They said that there was a fire in the landfill, and so people died, and that the city understood that they need to start educating people of creating not so much waste. And they developed the program for children, including the mobile applications through which children learn to separate waste. Okay, 2 SDGs you would notice now. We have no stories, and which is SDG number 14 and number 15, which is about oceans and things like that. So we really haven't heard about libraries programs in this respect. So, but when it comes to 16, this is the story from Colombia. After the FARC processes ended, so you know that there was a conflict, and then they resolved it, and many areas in Colombia for the first time actually started to receive government services, including library services. So, and they were trying to integrate those people back in the community, in the national system, through the services which is called mobile library. When they brought those boxes to the jungle and had cultural program, and this was the first time when some people actually received any government service or so far. And last thing is the story from Netherlands. If you will go online on the library map, you'll find we have 3 stories from Netherlands. And this one is about the Library and Basic Skills program, where libraries are helping people to use the digital services of the government, which is, I think, is a great program and helps. It's a big help to the government that libraries are producing. The SDG number 17 all is about the partnerships, and this is also one of the things that we want to highlight, that we are not working in silence, but that we work together with other institutions, and we really are partners for development, and it can be across so many different SDGs. Okay, that I skip.